Bun venit la o nouă ediție a emisiunii Ziua se apropie. În minutele care urmează vă prezentăm raportul european de la Bruxelles din luna iulie 2026 din seria de rapoarte lunare de acest fel. Moderatorul emisiunii, Yossi Lempkowicz, discută cu Tomas Sandell, directorul fondator al Coaliției Europene pentru Israel, și cu europarlamentarul Nicolás Pascual de la Parte despre motivul pentru care guvernul socialist spaniol, condus de Pedro Sanchez, reprezintă un pericol pentru Israel. Vizionare plăcută.
Why is socialist Spain Israel's worst enemy in Europe? Welcome to this new edition of the European Report here in the European Parliament in Brussels. Relations to Israel continue to divide EU member states. In a survey sponsored by the European Coalition for Israel in 2024, we saw that it revealed that countries in Central and Eastern Europe tend to be much more positive towards Israel than those in Western Europe. In recent years, a small group of nations stand out for being especially hostile towards Israel, and among them Ireland and Spain. In this edition of the European Report, we are going to take a closer look at Spain and try to understand why the current socialist government led by Pedro Sanchez is taking such a hostile position towards Israel. And for this, with us in the studio to answer this question, we have a Spanish member of the European Parliament, MEP Nicolás Pascual de la Parte, from the opposition Partido Popular Party, who is a member of the Committee on Security and Defense, and Tomas Sandell, as always, founding director of the European Coalition for Israel, who commissioned the survey I'm talking about. Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you very much.
My name is Yossi Lempkowicz, and this is the European Report. Tomas Sandell, I will start with you. You have, as I mentioned, commissioned the vote ranking in 2023 and 2024. It was the first time that such a ranking was made, and the results in both years were quite similar. Can you give us a brief summary of these reports and what they included?
Thank you, Yossi, and a pleasure to have our friend from Spain on the program as well. Yes, it's true that until 2023, there were no scientific research that would have looked into how the different parties are voting in respect to Israel. So we felt that it would be interesting just to see black and white. So we hired one of the leading research agencies here in Brussels to do the work. And they did it based on the identified votes that had a relation to Israel, the security, safety and security of Israel. So not issues related to Europe, anti-Semitism in Europe, but specifically Israel. And based on these votes, they calculated an index as to how supportive a particular party was, or how hostile. So what we see in this report is, on the one hand, a breakdown among party political groups, also the individual 160 at the time national political parties represented in this parliament, but they also then looked at specifically geographically at the nations. And basically two things are very visible here. Politically speaking, and this probably didn't come as a surprise to anyone, that parties on the center-right are much more positive, supportive of Israel than those on the other side of the political spectrum, on the political left. And to be concrete there, if you look at the top political group at the time, that was ECR, the European Reformists and Conservatives, and on the bottom side you have the left. When you look geographically, you also see a divide, which you was hinting at in the introduction, that countries in what we used to call Central and Eastern Europe, that in the past was under Soviet dominance, are much more supportive of Israel than countries in Western Europe. And as it relates to Western Europe, there's one country in particular that stands out, and that is Ireland, which is on the very bottom, not even close to the next one, with a percentage of 23.11. Whereas you have the highest one, which is Poland, which may come as a surprise to some, with 75.82. But the Visegrad countries are clearly more supportive than the European average. And if you look at Western Europe, you have countries like Italy, which is surprisingly positive towards Israel as well. And then to come to today's topic, Spain at the bottom end, not as bad as Ireland, and we need to dedicate a program to Ireland as they take the presidency in just a few weeks. But Spain and Portugal, for that matter, are less likely to support Israel, geographically speaking. But also there, and I'll end with that, of course, as we will see in this conversation, that even within Spain, there is a clear divide. And as we've heard so many times from friends from especially Partido Popolare, that people in general are very supportive, but as you said in the beginning of this current socialist government, supported by extreme left-wing parties, has been very hostile.
MEP Pascual de la Parte, Spain, your country, seems to be a little bit of a dilemma. In fact, on the one hand, and the survey that Tomas Sandell mentioned showed that the party which is the most supportive of Israel in the European Parliament in 2023-2024 was the Vox party. Is from Spain, while Spain as a country is one of the most hostile EU member states in relations to Israel. For example, and this is my question, how do you explain that Spain was the last Western European country to recognize the state of Israel and establish diplomatic relations with Israel, which happened only in 1986, and it was, by the way, a prerequisite to Spain joining the then European Economic Community. By the way, I will tell you something very interesting, that at the time, 1986, I was the only journalist from Israel working for the Jerusalem Post who covered the establishment of relations between Israel and Spain. It was in The Hague between then Felipe González and Shimon Peres. And I was there, the only Israeli correspondent. So how do you explain this fact?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Lempkowicz. I think I pronounced well your name.
Yeah, absolutely.
For inviting me to this broadcast. I think that here we have to be very clear and to distinguish clearly, as Mr. Sanders have just said, between the Spanish civil society and the Spanish government. Spain has very strong links historically and culturally with Israeli people. The Sephardites, they come from Spain, and they are one chunk of the Israeli society, very active and very constructive in Israel. I think that these shared historical roots we have to cherish and have to take care of them, because we are very linked. Well, I was very emotional when we went to Greece and I listened Ladino, which was the ancient Spanish spoken in the 15th century by Jewish, still there in Turkey and in Greece. And I could not imagine that so many people were able to speak this old Spanish language. I was really moved, really moved. I mean by that our common history, our common roots are something very important, and we have to take care of this. In addition to this, a proof of the rapprochement of the Spanish people and the Spanish country to Israel is that some years ago we approved a law giving the Spanish nationality to those Israelis who could prove the Sephardite origin. Well, to prove or not to prove, because the documents were not there for everybody, but it was a declaration, a statement, was enough for those who wanted to become Spaniards. And actually, we gave our nationality to many thousands of Israelis that nowadays they enjoy both nationalities. Yes. And they are holders of passports from Spain and passport. That means that we care about our common roots at civil society, our common history, and we want to have the closest possible relations culturally, economically, trade, and so on and so forth. Having said that, on the other side, we have nowadays in Spain a socialist government led by Pedro Sanchez, who is quite hostile to your country and to your government, especially to your government, because he's thinking that it is a kind of a positive leverage for mobilizing his electorate, which is left-wing orientated. We have to recall here that Spain is governed by a coalition government of socialists and communists. It's a leftist government. The leftist government...
Podemos en Sumar, right?
Yes. Partido Socialista, Socialist Party, and Sumar. Well, Sumar are the heirs of the communist ideology. Then we have a very leftist-oriented government, the leftists in our history probably, and in Europe as well. And they think that out of domestic calculus, domestic assessments, they think that it benefits them, the Socialist Party, and Pedro Sanchez personally, to oppose, to contradict, to confront the Israeli government. It's a pity, it's a shame, but it is based on domestic agenda that Pedro Sanchez and his government take this hostile approach to Israel's government.
And especially we saw it since October 7 with Spain pushing for suspending, even cancellation of the EU-Israel Association Agreement.
That's right. I mean, this is some manifestation of this hostility by the Spanish government. But again, it's not done out of the national interest, out of concern for the interests of Spain in foreign relations, but out of domestic agenda, very short-sighted domestic interest, which is the worst thing that the politician can do.
Yeah. Tomas Sandell, we mentioned the survey that was commissioned by European Coalition for Israel. It was then the first scientific vote ranking over ever conducted in the European Parliament over EU-Israel. And it received at the time a lot of media attention both in Israel and in Europe. Italian state television, for example, conducted an interview with you. You have been interviewed about the results. Can you tell us what has been the reaction in the international media to the findings of this survey?
Yes, it's true that this, since it was the first ever survey which was conducted scientifically, people were obviously interested to find the results. Sadly, I would say that there was a twisting which I was concerned about at the time, because if the conclusions are that today the support of Israel is on the political right and less so on the political left, which was the case if we go back 50 years ago, if you have left-wing inclinations as a journalist, you build your own theories and then you say, well, listen, this just proves that today's government. Why is it that parties such as Lega in Italy, Vox in Spain, and Hungary as a country are so supportive of Israel? It must be because they share a very extreme right-wing ideological view. And I thought this was problematic, and I always explained that these are numbers. We don't have any preference. We like to work with MEPs from every single political group. But the new reality is that the support for Israel, the understanding for Israel's situation is much higher on the conservative political right than it is on the left. And it also has very clear explanations that hasn't been so much studied until now. And we had a conference here just yesterday explaining anti-Zionism and where it comes from. And it was a researcher who was born in Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. And she said that this exactly follows the playbook of the Soviet communists already in the 1960s and in the 1970s, where they wanted to galvanize the global left with the anti-colonialist forces in the world. And they said, well, this is a good way of doing it. We explained that, Israel is racist, Zionism is racism, and this become part of the vocabulary of the global left at the time. And so that means why this is nothing that has just happened over the last few years, that the political left has become more anti-Israel. This goes back, it has been inherited. And I think this is, for some in media, it's a difficult pill to swallow, to say that, what they consider to be like an anti-colonial struggle is actually something that goes back to Soviet Union time. And that also explains why people who appreciate freedom, democracy, good relations with the United States, that acknowledge our Western Judeo-Christian heritage, also automatically subscribe to Israel. And I think the best example is your former prime minister and party chairman of Partido Popular, Jose Maria Aznar, who said, if Israel falls, we all fall.
Mm. MEP Pascual de la Parte, for many years there was widespread support for Israel in Europe. We saw it after the creation of the state. But after the Six-Day War in 1967, things have changed. And general attitudes in many parts of Europe have become more hostile towards Israel. In recent years, the situation has become even more hostile. We saw it, especially, as I mentioned, since October 7, but October 7, 2023, but also very polarized, not only in Europe, but also in the US. How do you explain this situation?
I think that I share very much the assessment delivered by Mr. Sanders, but I think there are many factors coming to explain the change of attitude of the European countries vis-à-vis Israel. One of them is the one that Mr. Sanders has put forward, to identify Israel as a colonialist power, a racist power, and the Palestinians as the colonized one, and the Goliath against David, and everybody wants to be in favor of David against Goliath. Ireland, for instance, is a small country of Europe, and history of independence from the UK. They identify historical parallelisms between the Palestine people without the state and the Irish people without the state as well. And you have to understand these historical parallelisms, or Finland, probably from another point of view. But this is one factor. The second one is perhaps that for the left in Europe, across Europe, to identify Israel with the US foreign policy was also an advantage for them. Yeah. One, if you cannot attack the big brother, you attack the small brother. It's not the same as, the Iranians say the big Satan and the small Satan. But for the left in Europe, across Europe, to put in the same sack the US and Israel as capitalist, imperialist powers was a simplistic way of approaching things that very, very didactic for their own followers. The third factor is that obviously when Israel was founded in 1948, it was founded on the basis of the kibbutz. The kibbutz were socialist-run small communities, and the left in Spain, many leftist politicians even went to the kibbutz in the summer in order to work free of, out of for nothing in this kibbutz as a way of solidarity with the Israeli people. This changed in the 60s and 70s. And this movement of sympathy from the European left with the kibbutz communities changed into hostility because they identify Israel as the representative of the American foreign policy in the Middle East, as a kind of carrier of the American interests in the Middle East. And obviously, it was a kind of confrontational approach for the left. And a fourth factor, perhaps, is that, perhaps the way Israel has explained itself in Europe and across the European country has not been always the best one. You know, I mean, we are different. Spain, for instance, now, I have explained before, it's very different, the opinion from the people on the street and the opinion from the government at power. Then you have to distinguish that and not to make a kind of a broad approach, enemies, friends, because you have a lot of friends in Europe and you have a lot of friends in Spain. And let me tell you one thing, here in the European Union, I would advise you not to rely on extremist groups, even if conjuncturally they support you. Your best friends here and your permanent supporters is the European Popular Party, the EPP. You have the best friends continuously in good times and in bad times. And it is a permanent feature of the EPP to have this balanced approach and this friendly approach with Israel.
Tomas Sandell, based on the survey we mentioned and your own observation over the last 25 years of EU-Israel relations, what are the central factors that explain how Israel is a divisive topic in the opinions?
I think it was explained very, very well, much better than I could do in the previous intervention. I would add perhaps one additional factor, and that is the European divide. On the one hand, we have what we call traditionally Western Europe, and then we have the new EU member states who have a very different history going back the last 50 years, having lived under totalitarianism, having been in situations where PLO and the terrorists were trained by the national intelligence services, say of Czechia or East Germany or other countries influenced by Soviet communism. And for them, once they got the freedom, and it's interesting to see, even globally speaking, what happened at the United Nations, this infamous declaration, Zionism is racism, was revoked in 1991. And you ask the question, well, why did this happen? Well, it happened as a result of the new wind of freedoms in Eastern Europe. And the first thing they wanted to do was to correct their relations with Israel. And so today you see that in these countries you have some of the strongest supporters of Israel. And now with this survey, it is also verified in numbers. Of course, it was a surprise, I think, for many that there is this divide, which you see, for example, then if you take the two variables, geographic and political, you end up with left-wing parties in Ireland and Spain and Portugal with very, very low sympathies for Israel, whereas as you have this partly new situation that could be a theme for a whole European report, how one should look at the support from not only the rightist parties, but also what could be explained as extreme right. That's a complicated issue, and I think that's what the Italian state television was trying to focus on and say that there's something fishy here, that they would have, Israel would have the strongest support in this group. I think for Israel to conclude on that point is they don't have the luxury to choose their friends. And that doesn't mean that in order to support or understand Israel's difficult position in the Middle East, that you have to adopt every single policy position of a particular group. So in that respect, I do agree with the previous speaker that of course, it's always good if it can be across the party lines and with the EPP in the middle and the dominant political force. I think they are a crucial factor, and that's why we are so happy to have your support and that of your colleagues.
MEP Pascual de la Parte, final question, very short because we have to wrap up. If there anything that Israel can do to change European attitudes in Europe to become more supportive of Israel, how do you see it?
I think that the best thing for Israel to do is to let itself be known by the public at large. Most people in Europe have the image that is depicted in the media of a colonizer, of who is at war with the neighbors, and as an aggressive and warmonger country. It is not the reality, but it is the image, distorted image conveyed by the media. Then my advice would be for the Israeli government, and not only the government, but for the Israeli society, to engage more with the civil society across Europe. Not so much with the governments, but with NGOs, universities, think tanks, political parties, trade unions, media, those who create the real image and the real idea of what it means Israel. I think that the more you get to know Israel, the more you recognize the important role that you are playing in the world, your relevance in the Middle East, and how best to engage with you. Then employ your time and your effort better in the civil society at large.
That was all for this edition of the European Report. I would like to thank you, MEP Nicolás Pascual de la Parte and Tomas Sandell, for this very interesting discussion on why is Spain so hostile in the EU on Israel and how to change this situation. My name is Yossi Lempkowicz, and this has been the European Report. See you again next month.
Emisiunea Ziua se apropie, se încheie aici. Vă mulțumim pentru atenție și vă dăm o nouă întâlnire săptămâna viitoare la aceeași oră. Sunt Codruța Burghelea, vă spun la revedere și Dumnezeu să vă binecuvinteze!